Hello, everybody. My name is Rawlson King. I am the counselor for Rita Rockcliffe, and I am happy to join you this afternoon for this Facebook Live video. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Sorry for being slightly late, but it's Rawlson King here, and I'm happy to join you for this Facebook Live video, where we will be discussing some of the concerns, some ward concerns around multiple issues, especially around COVID 19 and what's been going on at City Hall. So I will allow people to join. We have just launched, but I wanted to take this opportunity primarily to share with you the progress that we've been making in these unprecedented times. You know, although things have been very challenging and stressful for our residents in the ward and elsewhere, the reality is my office has been continuing to address the community's concerns. So we remain here and we're available for people to contact us and to work on multiple issues. Since the beginning of the pandemic, you know, I've advocated for multiple things, including the safe use of community gardens, called for parks to partially reopen, and have asked that race-based data be gathered about the impacts of COVID-19. So I'm happy to share all of the different initiatives that we've been working on, but this session is primarily for you. One of the key things that we will be doing is entertaining your questions and seeing what your concerns are and trying to answer them. But I'll take at least 5-10 minutes to talk about things that have been emerging around both the council table and in the ward. And so, as you might be aware, the big news yesterday was the debate around urban boundary expansion. And so that preoccupied a tremendous amount of our time at City Council yesterday. And we were voting on our growth management strategy as a city, the official plan, which is the blueprint of land use for our city. And unfortunately, the City Council, the majority of City Council did vote for the expansion of Ottawa's urban boundary. I voted against expansion, but obviously we were not successful with convincing our colleagues to do the same. Because while I think that greenfield development might be easier, increasing urban sprawl is really terrible for Ottawa's ecological and financial health. And so that's one of the reasons why I voted against it. I voted for more appropriate intensification, because that's a big belief of mine that we should really be focused on appropriate growth. Intensifying the lands within the urban boundary will require more infill development, but like I said, I think that should be appropriate development, appropriate intensification. And this intensification is necessary because we expect to have more than 400,000 new people in the city by 2046. And we have to remember, of course, that the current urban boundary encompasses areas such as Orleans and Sittsville. So it's not, the idea is that if we were not to expand the urban boundary, it didn't really mean, obviously, that everything would just be in the core. It would be in other established suburban developments. And we know that only a quarter of the lots that were allocated, in the last exercise are still available to be developed upon. So, I believe that the amount of undeveloped areas within our urban lands can accommodate the additional 195,000 homes that Ottawa needs. And obviously, if we were to grow through infill, our ward would see more construction. But I believe if that occurs in our ward, we would obviously need the appropriate infrastructure improvements, including additional sidewalks, cycling paths, water main, sewer, and recreational facilities. that would be needed to accommodate more healthy, active, and walkable neighborhoods. I'm also confident, and this is what's different about our ward, I'm also confident that a large proportion of projected growth can be accommodated in our ward through uh, space that we have around transit-oriented developments. Last year, around the council table, I actually did move a motion and gave a direction, moved a direction towards staff to undertake a public consultation exercise this year around the baseball stadium lands. We have about 9 acres of good space there that can be developed into mixed use development. And the other reality is that that space being designated a transit oriented development also can be subjected to inclusionary zoning, which ultimately means that we can actually, as a city, designate where housing for affordable housing can be sited, because we cannot easily do that through the zoning tools that we have right now at the city. But transit-oriented development can occur about 2 kilometers within a 1.9 kilometer radius of LRT transit station. We have the Max Keeping Bridge that goes over to Tremblay LRT. And so that gives us an interesting opportunity for intensification and development, along with the potential redevelopment of Ottawa community housing land, because we have a large swath of community housing properties that ultimately are at end of life. They were built in the 50s and they need to be replaced. And so it will give us an interesting opportunity, a master planned opportunity to deal with intensification in the ward. So because of all these things, I outlined those positions very clearly yesterday and voted against urban expansion. The other key thing is that we did release a 12-page policy paper outlining my ideas. Those ideas are still pertinent because we are still, regardless, going to be dealing with intensification. And I think it is important for us to ensure that we are looking at that in a substantive way. So that information is on my website, and it's still available for view. So I see that Peter has asked, how does urban boundary expansion affect Rideau Rockcliffe? Well, the key thing is that it can unfortunately affect the city in a negative way, in my estimation, because of costs. If we grow out rather than growing up, it will ensure that we have to have more water main infrastructure, road infrastructure extended. And so that is to the detriment of our environment. If you're talking about challenges, and I was just outlining that there for Rideau Rockcliffe, I believe that urban boundary expansion in terms of intensification can be done in an appropriate manner in Rockcliffe, through Rideau Rockcliffe, especially because we have specific areas that we can develop and that we can master plan, which I think is important. So it's just like I was saying before, the master planning can occur around the baseball stadium. I gave a direction to look at that and to have public consultation on how development can occur around the baseball stadium, it being a transit-oriented development, it being subjected to inclusionary zoning to direct affordable housing there, and also the fact that we have large areas of Overbrook that are coming up for redevelopment with Ottawa community housing. So there is the potential to apply the view of the 613 flats. That was an idea that was extended in that report, and to apply that to OCH redevelopment, along with public input around that potential development, I think, which is going to be very important. So having people being able to provide potential input on what they want to see. And we know that Ottawa, the Overbrook Community Association is very active and is articulating a vision of walkable neighborhoods, of more green space, of more green buildings, of green roofs. It's my hope that if we do have redevelopment, massive redevelopment of those blocks on Queen Mary and Prince Albert at some point in the future, that we actually have a conversation about the master planning that can be involved with that. So I think that, you know, we can do intensification in a more appropriate way in our neighborhoods. The key, of course, is ensuring, and I said this yesterday at council in my statement around urban boundary expansion, that we have the appropriate resources that come into place and are put into place, whether it's around soft infrastructure or hard infrastructure, ensuring that we have active transportation facilities and the appropriate investments so that we can actually achieve walkable 15-minute neighborhoods that are positive, that provide a positive contribution to our quality of life. So those are the keys in terms of urban boundary, and we had a very long day yesterday at council talking about that. The other policy components that we have been looking at have been community gardens, as food security is an important, particularly important issue and pertinent to our ward. I urged the province to recategorize community gardens as essential services earlier during this crisis, the earlier days of the crisis, to ensure that those who rely on those gardens as a food source can still access them. So working in conjunction with my colleague, Councillor Menard, I sent a letter to Christine Elliott, our Minister of Health at Queen's Park, calling unequivocally for community gardens to be reinstated as an essential service. And as we might know, community gardens, including the one in Overbrook, is really important because it actually does supplement the food sources of many vulnerable residents who rely on this food for their health and well-being. So I was pleased that that was successful, that our advocacy was successful in conjunction with other city councillors around the table as well who voiced concern. And so the government of Ontario did amend the emergency order permitting the use of allotment gardens and community gardens across the province. And these gardens are obviously an essential source of fresh food for some individuals and families, including those that face food security. So local medical officials are ensuring that they're providing advice, that they are providing the proper recommendations and instructions to ensure that the gardens are safe, so that there's physical distancing and proper cleaning and disinfecting of commonly used equipment and surfaces. And so we did have some success in advocating that, and for the last few weeks, we've seen community gardens opened. We also made a joint appeal with several councillors to consider partial reopening of green spaces to help with physical and mental health of residents. And that was also successfully entertained by city staff as well. So we ultimately did see staff open in a kind of constrained way, in a safer way, parks, and allowing people to go through those parks. And I also wrote a letter to the Associate Medical Officer of Health at Ottawa Public Health, outlining the need to collect race and socio-demographic data as it relates to the COVID-19 health crisis. We know that the global pandemic brought a new set of unprecedented circumstances and challenges to multiple communities, including racialized communities and Indigenous communities as well. And these circumstances have really created a new set of challenges for communities that are traditionally impacted, unfortunately, by discriminatory and harmful economic and environmental conditions. So in order to address these issues, I noted in my letter that it is essential that Ottawa Public Health introduce collection of race and economic socio-demographic data for use in health planning. We advocated in conjunction with community advocates. So I listened to the community, and they really were focused on this happening. And the reality was we saw Ontario, both Ontario and the city, really state over the last couple of weeks that they would also start to collect this data. And I think this is going to be a tremendous achievement. And we have different organizations within the city, actually working with city government, working with municipal government to work on that and to ensure that the data is collected and is used appropriately. In terms of council, yesterday we saw council receive an update on the impact of COVID-19 on the local economy and also on the city's economic recovery efforts. The city is going to follow a phased approach to restart and reset the economy and contribute to the resiliency of the economy. To support local business, staff are working to update fees on patios and tourist kiosks, grant temporary access for vendors and retail businesses to the city's right-of-way, launch the second phase of the Buy Local promotional campaign, and review applications for the Innovation Pilot Program. And I want to say it's very important that we actually do focus on small business. A few weeks back, I held a economic roundtable that included Michael Wood, a noted advocate for small business, along with other elected officials in Ottawa-Vanier. And it's very important that we do all that we can with the tools that we have available at the municipal, provincial, and federal level to ensure the continuity of our small businesses. We are a little bit luckier in Ottawa, of course, because we have a lot of institutional players, large players in the government and education sectors. But of course, the challenge that we have is that still a good proportion of our GDP, approximately 30%, is derived from small business. And small businesses have a massive number of challenges to retain and ensure that they're able to be viable. And so it's going to be important for us to advocate for as many resources that we can really put into place to ensure that we can retain the viability of those businesses. We're going to have a lot of challenges with business failures. We're having a lot of challenges with businesses not being able to pay rents. We have a lot of challenges with commercial evictions. And so it's going to be very important for us to have a plan in place to really address some of the areas that will really experience substantive problems, and that primarily includes retail businesses. Council also approved changes to right-of-way patio bylaws to make it easier for restaurants and cafes to open patios in the city, in the city's rights of way this year. So I think that's very important. We're looking at ensuring that the fees are not going to be a challenge for those businesses. And the other thing we wanted to make you aware of course, is that the city is now able. We went through a process with the planning committee, joint planning committee, and agricultural rural affairs committee meetings on urban boundary, and that was a successful set of meetings that were held electronically using the Zoom video conferencing platform. And as a result, the city clerk has really indicated to council that we can move ahead with more regular meetings. So some of the meetings that were canceled because of the challenges confronting us with holding those meetings because of COVID-19 are now able to be held. And so we're going to see more regularity in terms of some of the meetings that are going to be scheduled. And one of the first meetings that is going to be scheduled is the Transportation Committee, which will be holding meetings on Wednesday, June 3rd. And we will hear about patios, retail businesses. We're going to get an update on COVID-19 operations there. So we're going to start to see committees sitting. June 1st will be Transit Commission. June 3rd will be Transportation Committee. And the last item I'll leave you with is council is directing staff to develop a public awareness campaign about road safety in residential communities, including targeted outreach to remind delivery companies about speed limits. That has been a challenge that we've been seeing with less cars in the streets during the early and mid days of this crisis. We've observed more speeding. The police service has implemented a new campaign, so they have been cracking down on people who have been exceeding the speed limits, and that will continue for the weeks to come. So that was just a brief update on what is going on at the city. We are starting a phase where the city is starting to look at reopening certain services and respond to the reopening of the economy. This is going to be very important, obviously, and we will continue to require your input on some of those efforts that are being undertaken. In the meantime, our office is still working on a tremendous number of issues, including social issues. So we are always primarily looking at what is occurring around food security, around provision of services to our vulnerable, and we've been very involved in that effort, and will continue to be involved in those efforts. So now I'm just looking at some of the questions. And there was another question from Peter. The position paper helps define what we in Ward 13 wants to see now that expansion has been approved. What are the likely ramifications of this decision on Ward 13? Like I said, obviously there will be more pressures for intensification, we will see more infill. What we obviously want to undertake is infill that is appropriate. That has been the primary challenge that we've heard in Ward 13. So we know that people are not, and especially community associations and residents, are not against infill in and of itself, or intensification in and of itself. What they are against is the inappropriateness of some of that intensification, the fact that the infill does not suit the characteristics of neighborhoods, and the fact that there isn't a concurrent investments in neighborhoods that are needed to support the 15-minute neighborhoods within the core. And the reason why is because municipal financing works in different ways. If it's driven by growth in new subdivisions, then you see the creation of new infrastructure, both soft and hard. But the principal problem, of course, is if you intensify in an established area of the core, those fees have to come out of a budget that is looking primarily at maintenance or renewal. And there isn't as much money for renewal as there is for growth. And when we are looking at renewal also is subjected to prioritization across all the wards in the city. And so that creates challenges in and of itself. And so the scenarios that happen is that, we see more intensification, more population growth within the core, but then we do not have the finance mechanisms to ensure greater services to support that. So I think that is the next conversation that we have to have, ensuring that we have the proper investments to maintain the infrastructure that we have in the core, and that it's not all driven by growth infrastructure, growth dollars, growth financing that occurs as the urban boundary expands. So that is part of the challenge. But like I said, I think that we have an interesting scenario in Rita Rockcliffe because of the large proportion of green space and heritage conservation districts that we have. There is a level of control over the level of intensification. And then the other key issue, like I said before, is that many spaces for intensification in our ward can be localized and potentially can be master planned. And I think that that's important. Master planned with proper public input and consultation, because those master planning processes would be undertaken potentially by under the guise of the city, and or under the guise of one of its public agencies, its housing agency. So I think that that's important, having those tools so that we can make better decisions about the intensification that does occur in Ward 13. And so I'm just looking to see if there are any more questions. If not, I'll wait for some more questions. But one of the other items that did pop up at council, which I did not specifically speak to during the council meeting, was around safe supply. And I do know that my colleague Matt Fleury had actually introduced that motion, and I was pleased to support it. And I was pleased to support it, especially due to the fact that one of the first times I interfaced with a public body was giving a deputation many years ago in front of the Public Health Board around preventing harm. And I had done that in the context of sitting on the board of the Rita Rockcliffe Community Resource Center. And that's one of the reasons why I had no problem actually backing Councillor Fleury's motion around safe supply. Because as we know, opioid addiction continues to devastate communities across Ottawa. People from addiction continue to be affected by overdose, poisoning, infection, disease, transmission, and death because of an illicit drug market dominated by toxic supply. That's why I was really happy to support Councillor Fleury's motion to ask the mayor to write to the provincial and federal health ministers to support the expansion of safe supply in Ottawa, because like I said, I'm committed to the idea of harm reduction, and I've spoken to public bodies about that in the past. Meaningful and purposeful expansion of the provision of safe and regulated drugs to compete with the black market will significantly curtail the harms associated with addiction, and is a necessary step to stop the ongoing overdose crisis in our city. That's why I supported the collective opinion of the Overbrook Community Association, which, as many people know, I formerly led. Residents there at that association noted that safe supply is a harm reduction tool that will help keep communities safe. They acknowledge it as an illness. I think this is important. And that neighbors that might be engaged in drug use deserve dignity, support systems that help improve their quality of life, stabilize their well-being, improve their capacities to access housing, and maintain healthy relationships. We know, and often this does impact people in our neighborhoods, that illicit drug use often is tied to petty crime. So I was pleased with Overbrook's statement that really emphasized the fact that safe supply can also reduce drug-related petty crimes, as individuals do not have to hustle or panhandle to make money to purchase drugs, and as they have a reliable, safe supply of known quality to access instead. And one of the other reasons why I concurred, and this actually had a wide amount of support at council at the vote, I think there are only 2 or 3 people who voted against it, was because this is a very, it's not a unique position in the sense that across the board, whether it's philosophically or ideologically, there was tremendous support for the motion. I know that both our former police chief and now Senator Vern White expressed support the motion. And we know that Dr. Jeff Turnbull, who's the former chief of staff at the Ottawa Hospital, also showed a tremendous amount of support for the expansion of the current safe supply program. So I was happy to support that and to provide support to my colleagues who introduced that, both Matt Fleury and Catherine McKinney, who have more acute challenges in their ward around opioid addictions, though that's spreading everywhere throughout the city. So I was pleased to support that. And I see another question here. What are the kinds and types of major development that are slated for Ward 13 with regards to roads, parks, and other city infrastructure? In terms of roads, we will be seeing in the future some repaving, and we will be also seeing some public works that will be undertaken in terms of improvements, water main improvements. So we are going to be experiencing that. That actually started Fanier Parkway, Pressland. So we're seeing water main improvements there, and that will involve a little bit of repaving. We are going to see within the next 3-year span repaving occur on major routes throughout the ward. So we are having discussions about repaving on Donald Street, and we are actually going to start to see a segment of Donald Street next to St. Laurent actually repaved within the nearer term. We're having discussions about repaving throughout New Edinburgh, and that's going to actually occur in conjunction with the wrap-up of the CSST. So as that project winds down, and because of the tremendous amount of traffic, truck traffic that was undertaken for that huge public process, we're going to see some infrastructural renewal on a number of streets, including Stanley. So that's going to occur. We're also examining repaving on St. Laurent as well. So there are going to be a number of streets where that infrastructure will come into play, and will be slated for some renewal. In terms of parks, we would have this month, actually, if we hadn't had the COVID-19 crisis, seen the opening of the new park in Overbrook. And so that would have been tremendously exciting. So Lola Park at Lola and Pressland would have been very exciting to have seen reopened. But we are, through our Building Better Revitalized Neighborhoods program looking at enhancing the quality of parks. So we continue to do that. And in terms of other key infrastructure, like I said, we can expect more renewal. So part of that renewal process, and this also deals with roads, is that we will have a major renewal project on Cummings. And so we will see the application of a complete street concept from the top of Cummings at Montreal Road all the way down to the bottom of Cummings. So there are definitely a number of key infrastructure projects that are going to be undertaken throughout the ward over the course of this term. And Jason, I think, asked about speeding on Montreal Road. I know my staff has responded. Obviously, it's important for us to report speeding. I know that we had a conversation, Jason, before COVID-19, when I had a community conversation at your location, and so it is something that is on the list. There is also as you might know, and I was relaying to you, There is an environmental assessment study that is being undertaken on Montreal Road to look at transit priority, and that always is a good exercise. We're going in the right direction there, because that means that we will start to address traffic at a kind of a more design level once we get into infrastructure improvements. Because once we improve any road, we typically, as per policy, really engage in a complete streets view that really takes into account not only transit, which that study is going to entail, but also active transportation infrastructure that deals with cyclists and pedestrians. But the most important thing in the meantime, because I know that you were talking about a lot of the challenges around Montreal Road and speeding, is to ensure that we are continuously reporting it, because our speeding, when we deal with speeding, when the police service deals with it, it's based on statistics. They will respond and allocate resources based off the number of people who actually report the problem. So it's very important for us to have residents on a continuing basis report those challenges to the police service. The traffic section of the Ottawa Police Service will examine those statistics, and if they see enough complaints, then they actively respond. And Peter asks, is there action happening on the recent rat issues that have affected the area? Yes. So the good news is, at the end of December, I actually worked in conjunction with my colleague Matt Fleury, because Vanier shares some of the issues that Overbrook has, and we actually passed a rat motion around the table, and that was a good first step, because we were hearing a lot of complaints last summer about the increases in rats, especially when I think of the Overbrook section of the ward. I know that firstly, we saw an increase in the rat population starting in 2009 with the introduction of the green bin program, unfortunately. A lot of people, and I would say that goes beyond anecdotal evidence, that people did see, including pest abatement companies, started to see a lot of issues around increase in the rat population because of the potential way that these compostable materials were being stored. And so it's gone up from there. In context of Overbrook, I know that people started to really report an increase in the rat population a couple years back, in conjunction with the LRT construction. So when I was at the community association, I had heard stories that people were suggesting that the rats might have been disturbed, their ecosystems might have been disturbed by the LRT work. They made their way across the river, and then we saw some infestation in the area known as West Overbrook, and now we're seeing increased issues around rats. And so what we did was we moved a motion that was successful that looks at pre-baiting, number one, for infrastructure projects. So as example, future work like that work that's going on Vanier Parkway in Pressland, like I was talking about. In the ideal scenario, in the future, the city will ensure that they pre-bait where appropriate when they dig and they undertake these infrastructure projects, because we know that when they disturb these areas, or they're doing water main work, then residents adjacent can be affected, and they can see a larger increase in those populations. So that's one item that we're looking at, along with ensuring that there's proper and appropriate baiting in parks, city parks. And the other key component of the new motion that we had moved was looking at ensuring that we deal with rat abatement in abandoned properties. So ensuring that the city, if they have to take proactive action, if we have properties that are abandoned and become rat-filled and really negatively impact residents, that there's a mechanism that the city can deal with that and ensure that they collect the dollars for doing that from the landowner. So these are some of the first steps that we've taken. The motion is passed. It needs to be implemented by staff. Once it's implemented by staff, we will do some analysis of that. But I'm very cognizant of the issue that people are going to have with this, and that they have with it, because I live in Overbrook, and often I will go out to my backyard and see rodents, and it is definitely annoying. But I think that we also have to ensure that we take the appropriate action to reduce their population. So ensure that we're very careful with how we engage with feeding other animals, with bird feeding, ensuring the hygienic maintenance of our properties. We have to be proactive, but the city will continue to take steps and analyze this issue. So what I can say is, if you do see rats, ensure that you report it to 311. Very important, because we're going to ask for the collection of that data and get a sense of different trends, and that will shape our policy on a go-forward basis. It will also allow us to evaluate what we put into place in terms of rat abatement. So, I know Jane Ann has just asked a number of questions. Will the city open up the Overbrook Community Center for heat relief for local residents? The St. Laurent complex is a little far. We will be asking city staff on the other facilities that they are going to propose to potentially open in the future. I know that based on the facilities and the location, along with the capacity to ensure proper social distancing protocols and cleanliness, those have been driving factors in terms of what has been opened. We expect some more consultation with councillors in terms of the future, in terms of what other facilities are opened. But obviously during this heat warning, those 4 key centers, including the St. Laurent complex, will be the only ones that will be open during this period. But we will be following up with staff, because I know that one of my other colleagues, Jeff Leeper, was asking for other locations in his ward to be opened up. And so I think that the approach was primarily driven by what city staff could accomplish in terms of different guidelines and in terms of the resources that are available. But as those resources come back online, we'll continue to ask those questions and see if we can have other locations that are a little bit more centrally located to a lot of people who might need them, especially low-income people. Okay, so I'm seeing another question. The next question from Jane Ann is, so this might not have been done. We may get more rats. Rats here in Preston. Neighbors have seen them. I have not yet. I mean, the key thing is that there are rats in Overbrook. That's been confirmed. The city is working on 2 fronts. So we have the rats motion, and the other front that we are working on is ensuring that there's a better property maintenance standard compliance at OCH properties, since we have a large number of OCH properties that are adjacent to your neighborhood. So the key for us is ensuring that we monitor what's happening, that we implement these new standards around rats, and that we work in conjunction with OCH to ensure that there is better property standard management. And we're hoping that these tools will lower the number of rats that we have in our neighborhood. Okay. And so Peter is asking, are there smartphone apps available from the city that facilitate citizen reporting, given the importance of citizen reporting in soliciting a service from the city? So I know that at one point we've had different innovation competitions, and we've had access to open data. We've left that open to the private sector to really take advantage of the open data to build applications. I think that we need to have a push for more open data and for the potential of application development by the city. We know that there's sometimes challenges around that. So I know that we've had apps in the past, especially around bus data, that have not been as good, to be blunt with you, than some of the solutions that have been developed by private developers or not-for-profit software developers who are just trying to visualize some of the data or utilize some of the data to do things. So I think that we could be stronger in terms of what we're doing in terms of IT in the city, in terms of accessibility of IT resources. But I think the key thing, and my staff is actually popping up that information. There is an app that will allow you to make 311 reports and utilize photos like right off your phone. So there are tools there, but I would prefer, obviously, that we see more development of tools that provide, in my estimation, more functionality and the potential for greater public input and greater access to open data. And I'm just reviewing to see if there are any more questions. And now I'm just scrolling up to ensure that I haven't missed anything. And I don't see any more questions. I'm willing to obviously be here for another 10 minutes based on my schedule. So if there are any more questions, I'll entertain them, because that was primarily the goal of this session, was just to provide people with some opportunities to ask those questions. It's not as formal as the coronavirus town hall that we had, but I want to let people know that the city is working hard and is continuing to deliver those essential services that are necessary. I think that we've actually done an excellent job versus a lot of the challenges that other municipalities have faced. And we do have hardworking staff that have been continuing to ensure that these services continue to be delivered, whether they're public service, public works, and administrative services. And I think that that's important, that we have all this good work going on, whether it's sewer work, sewer repairs, water repairs, hydro services are still going. So we get the reports if lines go down. The crews still go out and do the work. And the heavy work is being done, obviously, at this difficult time by Ottawa Public Health, who I thanked at the last council meeting, especially the paramedic service, this being Paramedic Services Week, the tremendous work that they're doing responding to the COVID-19 crisis, and the whole bevy of city employees that are really positively engaged in the city. The work that they're doing is just incredible. So I'm always, I always keep at the top of my mind to thank them. Often it's very easy to criticize the city and municipal government, but it is delivering the majority of the services that people interface with every day. And so it is important that we continue to have a high quality level of essential services being delivered at this time. I think that's very important. In terms of COVID-19, I think the key for us is to continue to be vigilant. We see that the economy is starting to open up. We're seeing shops are starting to open up. But we were briefed by Dr. Vera Etches, our Chief Medical Health Officer at Council yesterday. And despite the fact that we are making progress in terms of infections and in terms of hospitalizations, we see that those rates are declining. It is important that we remain vigilant because if we aren't, we could easily see another wave of this. Another wave is projected to happen. We want to ensure that wave is not detrimental. I definitely remain concerned in Rideau Rockcliffe because, as you might know, you know, we had information released, data released that showed that we have higher rates of infection here. In fact, we have some of the highest rates of infection per 100,000 people in the city. And so one of the key things that we continue to do is we continue to work in conjunction with the other elected officials, including Tim Turney in our neighboring ward, Beacon Hill, Sayreville, with Matt Fleury over in Rockcliffe Vanier, in Rideau Vanier, and we work with our MP Mona Fortier and our MPP Lucille Collard, and we discuss things. And one of the things that we discussed this week was the idea of having a COVID assessment center in the East End. That's absolutely necessary. So we did raise that at council because we have a high proportion of lower income people here. They need access to services. It's very important that they have access to those services. And they're the ones who are disproportionately affected by this disease. So it makes sense that they have access to testing and close access to that testing so that they don't have to go across the city in order to access it. So that's very important. And I see that there might have been another question. And this is coming from Sophia. And she is talking about the Donald Street St. Laurent crossing. We've been seeing drivers respecting the bike lanes where pedestrians cross. The safety is important. And it's great that we've been working hard to improve that. And we've obviously talked and been on the media and really emphasized the fact that there's a proper way to use that protected intersection. And the good news is, I was talking in reference to Peter's question about infrastructure. There will be work that will be done on repaving the main line of Donald Street. And we know that a small section of Donald Street will be done. And I was just recently having conversations with city staff about ensuring that measures are put into place so that we can actually continue to really differentiate that protected intersection as we approach it. One of the challenges, of course, is that they're flex stakes. They're temporary measures. They go in during the spring and the summer, but when they come out, people become confused. And so with the opportunity to do a bit of repaving there, it will make sense to ensure that the approaches to that intersection are protected and protect the cyclists, pedestrians, and ensure that people do not end up in that cycling lane by mistake. So, and I'm just reviewing for any more questions. If there are none, since we are approaching the top of the hour, I want to thank you for joining me on this afternoon pop-up meeting. I must say I really do miss getting out into the community and doing this on a regular basis, monthly basis in the community, where we're able to shake hands and share a coffee or a tea and talk about some of the issues that are emerging in the community. But the most important thing for you to know is that despite COVID-19, We are here working for you. We're working hard every day to ensure the vitality of our ward, of our community, and we are open here for you to take your questions. And so all you really need to do is to go to my website, and that's rideau-rockcliffe.ca, and you'll be able to access by clicking on contact. You're going to be able to get information on how to contact our office through multiple means, whether that is through phone or by email. And the one thing that we would encourage you to do in order to get the latest information about what's going on in the ward is to sign up for our newsletter. Our newsletter goes out on a weekly basis, now a bi-weekly basis, usually because of COVID. We're trying to provide a tremendous amount of information about what's going on at the city on a regular basis, so residents know what services are available, what services they can access, and keep in contact with us about different policy developments that are emerging at City Hall. So thank you for taking the time today to join me. Once again, our office is always open. My virtual door, unfortunately, I can't have access to that physical door on a daily basis at City Hall, but the virtual door is always open, and we invite you to participate, provide us inputs, tell us what's going on that is wrong and what is going on that's right in the community, and where we can make improvements as a city, as a ward. It's really important for us. We really do value that feedback, and we work hard to try to respond to your requests, and most importantly, attempt to get resolution for some of the challenges that might be observed in the community. So thank you so much for taking this time to join me over this hour. I'm looking forward to speaking with you soon. There will be a series of town halls that we will hold in conjunction with the other elected officials in our neighborhoods. So I know that next week, and look out for this soon, we'll be posting some information about it. But next week, we anticipate having a town hall with Mona Forche and with Lucille Collard, along with community associations from Vanier and Overbrook. So just watch out for that on our social media channels. And thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon again.